Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this special event, a marathon, not a sprint. How can we support Ukrainian refugees? If you're joining us tonight because you are hosting a Ukrainian refugee family, first of all, let me just say thank you, well done. The whole point of our evening tonight is to cheer you on and give you some practical and hopefully inspirational help to keep going. What you are doing really matters, and we're grateful. My name is Chris Candoya, and I am the founder of the Sanctuary Foundation. It's a charity that's been set up in recent months, actually. We've been responding to the large movement of people from Hong Kong, and after that, people from Afghanistan. And I kept starting new entities, and I thought, you know what? Sadly, there's an ongoing number of large issues affecting society. Maybe I need a new entity that we can do it for lots of different eventualities. So Sanctuary Foundation was founded, and we've been putting on webinars like this to support and encourage people to come forward, but also help them with some of the practical things that people are facing. We do have another seminar on our website about children and trauma in particular. But as I was speaking to people, many people are telling me that they're really passionate about helping Ukraine, but have hit some barriers, roadblocks, challenges in their support of Ukrainian families. So we thought, well, let's get some experts in the room and have a chance to hear from them. So throughout this evening, you're going to be hearing from lots of different people with lots of different expertise. There'll be an opportunity for you to ask questions. You can do that in the YouTube chat. We're going to ask you to be encouraging and gracious. You can be straightforward, but let's support one another. We're all in the same boat, all facing challenges and difficulties, but we could be a help to one another. So I've seen it in the past where someone's asked a question and other people have said, well, I've tried this and I've tried that. Brilliant. Have those conversations and cheer people on. Our speakers are all giving their time for free. We're grateful for them. So if someone says something you like, tell them. Say, that was fantastic. Thank you so much. And if you want more information, feel free to ask those questions in the chat and I'll try and ask them to our guests. So throughout the evening, we're going to be hearing from various speakers, including Rachel Poulton, who's going to be up first. She's talking about self-care and serving others. Rachel's been a foster carer for quite a long time and has particular expertise in caring for unaccompanied asylum-seeking children. You'll hear from her in a minute. After that, we're going to hear from Susanna Baker, who runs a support charity in North Devon with lots of experience with previous sponsorship programs, including people from Syria. So we've got lots of expertise there. Then we're going to be hearing from a trauma specialist, Wendy Jackson, talking about trauma and long-term support. And after that, I'm really excited. We've got Tanya joining us, who is both a trauma expert and someone who's arrived here from Ukraine. So she can answer our questions from both personal experience and professional experience. And then at the end of our evening, some of you will have heard of the fantastic Professor Lucy Easthope, who's a disaster recovery expert. And you'll have a chance to actually win her book as we go through the evening. So that's our lineup. That's what we've got planned. It's going to be a jam-packed evening. We're looking forward to spending it with you. But hear this, at the very beginning, I want to say, well done. What you are doing is historic. What's happening here right now is the largest hosting program the UK has seen since the Second World War. The last time this number of people were hosted, it was 10,000 Jewish children fleeing the Nazis in the kinder transport. We have somewhere in the region of 55,000 Ukrainian people staying in homes like yours. You are making history, and we just want to congratulate you and cheer you on. Let's have our first guest. This is Rachel Poulton, who's a dear friend of mine. You might have seen us working together. We've been on BBC Breakfast together. I think we've been on some radio programs together. Rachel's been doing fabulous work for a long time, and particularly experienced in helping children who've had lots of trauma in their lives. And Rachel, you're a very other-centered person. You know, you're always giving yourself away. But I'm asking you quite a difficult question today. What is it you do to kind of look after yourself to make it more sustainable? Give us some lessons, please.
Okay, thanks, Krish. Yeah, we've shared our home with quite traumatized refugees for the past 6 years. And this whole idea of self-care is something I've actually struggled with a great deal. And I think the first reason for this, and this may be common to others as well, is that it feels very indulgent. You know, we're living alongside people who've been through terrible experiences and they have ongoing difficult, awful things happening in their country of origin. And then we start thinking, well, what about me? How can I look after myself? And that feels a bit indulgent. But I've also learned that it is really, really important. We love sharing our home with refugees. We intend to continue, but I know we can only do that if we're just keeping an eye on a few things. So perhaps for me, that was the first block to self-care, was feels indulgent, but now I know I need to do it. Also, often it's a pretty busy life and we've lost our usual routine. So maybe our usual support structures aren't there. Sometimes it can feel a bit isolating when you're kind of busy with appointments and form filling and orientating people, to actually connect with the usual support systems we might have. So I've put together just a few little tips of things which personally we found helpful, and maybe some of those might be useful for others as well. I think first of all, I've learned to be honest with myself and not to feel that sort of guilt feeling if I'm frustrated, low, sad, often just a bit tired, really. But to actually kind of pause for a minute in the busyness and think, what am I actually feeling and why is that? And then to have someone trusted to talk to about it. Instantly, that should not be the person that you've welcomed into your home or supporting, I don't think. But just have someone just that is always there and understands and asks the right questions. Personally, I think it's wise to avoid talking to lots of people and getting bombarded with all their responses, which might not all be helpful. And personally, again, I tend not to join loads of group chats, partly because I'm quite busy, but particularly if they seem to be the sort where there's quite a bit of negativity going on, it can actually just drag things down more than lift them up. I think another thing that's quite pertinent is this business of the fact there are quite a lot of us doing this now in UK, and we will all do it slightly differently, that no two households will run the same. And yet there's a feeling maybe of, I have to get this right. There's a right way to do this, or it has to be perfect. We are all just trying our best. And I think that's what the people who share our homes recognize, is if it comes from the heart, we're trying, even when there's the odd mess up. Interestingly, I have a good friend who I'm in touch with most days. She also cares for young refugees. And it was only after about 4 years that she said to me, I always feel like the ones in your home have a better deal than the ones in mine. And I burst out laughing because for exactly the same length of time, I'd struggled with the same feelings about her. And we just realized we shouldn't compare. I think avoiding the blame game is helpful. Often things aren't perfect. There's new systems at work here. There may be difficulties with professionals, with different agencies, with all the sort of form filling and submissions of papers and so on. And there can be even more blame, even more personally than that. Oh, well, this would go better if only. I think I try just to avoid that, because it's the whole situation that's wrong. It's the whole war. It's the whole cause of this thing. And just to avoid getting dragged into that, because it's not too productive. I think the most important thing, which is very obvious, and I'm sure all of you have thought of this, is identify what is helpful and what brings you refreshment, even if it's only for 5 minutes a day. And that's in mentally, like something a bit stimulating, the book you're reading, something. Physically, personally, I go for a walk every day. And if I don't do that walk, I miss it. And I walk around the same field. But whatever it is, just try and build that into your routine, emotionally as well, and spiritually. For those who find that helpful, we need to make sure that we get that daily refreshment, if we can, in each of those areas, even if it's just short. And if it isn't possible, don't think you failed. Some weeks go by and I probably haven't managed a whole lot of that, but I'll become aware of it and I'll think, I need to make sure I get back to building that in. Sometimes, perhaps at the end of a day that's not been the easiest, people can feel a little bit sort of trapped almost in this situation that's built up around them. And what I find helpful then is just to go back to the beginning. Like, why did we choose to do this? And what was our thinking behind that? And just to go through that process again can be really helpful and just recharges the batteries, gets the energy levels up, and we're off again. And lastly, I guess I'd say, well, one more thing first, ongoing trauma. We know that our guests, the refugees we are caring for, supporting, will have this. They'll have it up in news feeds, let alone from all their personal contacts. There's also the secondary trauma, which will affect us as we get closer and closer to them. And just to be aware of those two things, I expect some of our other experts will be talking more about that this evening. Lastly, I'd just say find an encourager, find someone who lifts your spirits. You might want to follow Krish on Twitter as one of mine, but just find those things or people who will just give you that little lift when you're low. And yeah, I think those are probably the main things. A bit of a haphazard bunch of things. Somewhere in that mix up, find things to laugh about if you can too. But that's pretty much what helps us get through as a family.
Thank you, Rachel. That's so helpful. And those are hard-won, experience-based truths. So thank you for bringing them. I'm just wondering, what is it that motivates you to keep going? Because you have quite a few placements. People stay with you for a while, and then maybe they kind of move on, and then you do it all over again. Some of us are hosting for the very first time, and I might be finding it hard. What's your why? What's the motivator that kind of gets you going in this?
I think it's just knowing how fortunate we are. And I've said this recently to a family we're supporting. Well, of course we'd want to do this. What if the situation was reversed? What if that was my family? I mean, that's one of my ones. It's just switch it over and think, what would I want for my kids? What would I want for my family if we were far from home? That helps. Personally, I'm super fortunate, really, because we have been doing it a while. And we've seen some of the good things that can build out of really difficult, sad, painful situations. And it's not all happy endings. It's not all easy, of course, but there are always good bits to spot.
It's really helpful. We've got loads of different questions. Some of them I'll save up for a bit later. Sandra says, Rachel, that's exactly my reason for opening my home. That kind of empathy. What if it was me? That's really helpful. I'm just wondering, there's some people are asking about, is it recorded? Yes, it's going to be recorded. We can't do closed captions on this platform, but that will be available on the recording because we'll host it on YouTube. So hopefully that will help you. Lots of people here are either waiting to host or are relatively new at hosting. That's the other thing that we're hearing, which is interesting. What do you guys find helpful in keeping yourselves going? Let's ask that to the audience. We've got a really diverse audience. We've got people from the Highlands of Scotland. We've got people from the south of England. Great to see you. Let us know what do you find helpful to keep yourselves going in these kind of situations. Let's have a chance to ask that. Brilliant. And Rachel, tell us a little bit about your household, like who's in it at the moment.
Okay, at the moment we have my husband and I, our two youngest children. We have 4 young refugees, and we have an elderly friend who's 101, and I think that's everyone. Is that 9? And a dog. Yeah, that's us. And we have a Ukrainian family who lived with us for a few weeks and then moved to a house just a few doors down our street. So we spend lots of time with them too.
That's amazing. It's really good. That's something that's been really powerful in this Homes for Ukraine program. I was in Scotland last week and they did something amazing. They had the super sponsor program, which meant that you didn't have to find a sponsor. The Scottish government will be your sponsor, which has meant that people have gone straight into hotel accommodation. But the thing they're struggling with now is finding hosts that are willing to take people that were in the hotels. That the news cycle has moved on. We're not hearing about Ukraine every day. And some people who were initially really passionate are not so passionate anymore. And they're having quite a large dropout rate from people that said they'd do it and they're not doing it. But I think one of the genius things about the Homes for Ukraine program, whether intended or not, is that people have made a very personal connection with someone in Ukraine. And even if it's taking weeks for them to come here, that commitment, that relational bond seems to be the reason why people are still interested. And I love the fact that you've got someone living a few doors down that was living with you, but you've now got that relational bridge, because when you arrive, you're going to need some ongoing friends in the area that can help you navigate life. Brilliant. Was there anything else you wanted to say to us, Rachel, before we bring in our next guest? We'll be hearing from you a little bit later on when we do our Q&A together.
I might just say for the people who are still waiting, maybe have a look at building up. It's pretty obvious what your supports are, what your helpful things are, what's not helpful. Sometimes I don't access all of the emails I get, sorry folks, or all of the information that's out there, because that in itself can become a stress. And I've identified that as a thing that stresses me out. So I'll look for information if I need it, but I won't anymore read everything I'm sent. Advice.
That's a good idea. You know, if you are in that waiting game, and some people have been waiting a long time for visas, it does seem to be getting quicker now. A practical thing you could do is kind of build your resilience network early. You know, what your rhythm's going to be that will help you keep going. It's like I've got some rowers staying with me at the moment, and they're carb loading, ready for the race ahead. They're thinking down the track. Well, what resilience loading could you do? What preparation could you do? What network could you build? What research could you find that will make life easier when you do start that? That's a good advice, Rachel. Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us. We will hear you again a little bit later on this evening.